We tend to think of laws as rock solid, right? Black and white. But what happens when the words on the page, the very words that are supposed to give us clarity, end up creating total confusion? Well, that's the fascinating puzzle we're going to unravel today, the art of legal interpretation. And this is really the heart of the matter. A new law gets passed, we all think, okay, that's settled. But so often, that's just the beginning of the argument. And that argument usually ends up in a courtroom with a judge who has to figure out what it all actually means. So why does this happen? Well, here's the root cause. A very famous judge once pointed out that human language just isn't like math. It's not this super precise instrument. It's messy, it's flexible, which means words can be a little fuzzy. But where things get really tricky is when a word isn't just vague, but truly ambiguous. See, ambiguity isn't just about a word being a bit unclear. It's about a single word having several totally separate meanings. Think about the word conveyance. In a law about traffic, it probably means a vehicle, like a car. But in a law about property, it means the legal document that transfers ownership. It's the exact same word, but it describes two completely different things. It all comes down to context.
All right, so to really get how judges tackle this, we need to look at the materials they're working with. You've got two main sources of law. On one hand, you have legislation. These are the laws written by a formal body like Parliament. The source material calls this the coin of the realm, ready to spend. Then you have precedent or case law, which comes from decisions judges have already made. That's more like gold in the mine. It's super valuable, but man, you have to dig through a lot to find it. For this explainer, we're going to focus on that shiny coin, legislation.
Okay, so a judge gets a law and it's ambiguous. What do? They don't just flip a coin or go with their gut. Nope. They've got a whole toolkit, one that's been built up over centuries. These are a set of principles, traditionally known as the canons of construction. This toolkit has three classic tools to start with. First up, the most straightforward one, the literal rule. Basically, you just read the words on the page and take them at their plain, ordinary meaning. Sounds simple, right? Yeah, until it leads to some truly bizarre outcomes. And that's when you need the second tool, the golden rule, which is kind of like a safety valve. And then there's the third one, the mischief rule, where the judge has to put on their detective hat and do a little historical digging. And this quote, wow, it just perfectly sums up how strict the literal rule can be. The whole idea behind it is judicial restraint. A judge's job is to apply the law exactly as it's written, not to try and improve it. So even if following the words leads to something that seems totally ridiculous, hey, the words are the words, period. Right, but what happens when the result isn't just a bad idea, but it's genuinely, laughably absurd? Well, that's what the golden rule is for. You can think of it as the escape hatch. It gives a judge permission to tweak the ordinary meaning of the words just enough to avoid a result that makes absolutely no sense, something the lawmakers could never have possibly wanted. But this all brings up a much bigger question, doesn't it? Instead of just waiting for an absurd result and then fixing it, what if a judge tried to figure out the law's original purpose right from the get-go? I mean, how on earth you get inside the head of the people who wrote the law years ago? Well, believe it or not, the oldest tool in the box gives us the answer. It's called the mischief rule, and it goes all the way back to 1574. It essentially tells a judge to act like a historian. By asking these 4 specific questions, a judge can zero in on the exact mischief, that's the old-timey word for the problem, that the law was created to solve. And once you know the problem, you interpret the law in a way that stomps it out. Now, these different rules, they're not just, technical choices from a menu. They actually represent a huge philosophical battle about what a judge is even supposed to do. Is a judge just a faithful servant to the text? Or are they more like a partner helping to make the law work better? This clash of philosophies is captured perfectly in the famous disagreement between 2 legal titans, Lord Denning and Lord Simons. Let's kick things off with Lord Denning and his incredible metaphor. He basically said, look, if a law has a flaw, a little crease in the fabric, a judge shouldn't just shrug and say, oh, well, bad writing. No, they should get in there and iron out the creases to make the law work the way it was meant to. This is what people often call the activist or pragmatist view. For someone like Denning, a judge's real job is to hunt down what Parliament intended to do. And once they find it, they should, in his own words, give force and life to that intention, even if it means filling in a few blanks in the text. But standing on the complete opposite side of the ring was Lord Simons with a fiery counterpunch. He looked at what Denning was doing, this whole filling in the gaps idea, and called it, and this is a direct quote, a naked usurpation of the legislative function. I mean, wow, it doesn't get much more blunt than that. This is the classic formalist view. From this standpoint, judges are interpreters, period. They are not co-authors. If there's a hole in the law, well, that's a problem for Parliament to fix by passing a new law. Any judge who tries to patch that hole themselves is stepping way out of line and messing with the balance of power. So there you have it, two completely opposing ideas about what a judge should be. On one side, you've got Denning, the pragmatist who's all about finding the intention and ironing out the creases to do justice in the case, right in front of him. On the other, you've got Simons, the formalist, who says you stick to the words and anything else is a dangerous power grab. And for a really long time, it felt like you had to choose a side. Were you Team Denning or Team Simons? But more recently, a new way of thinking has started to take hold. A more unified, holistic approach that doesn't see these rules as enemies, but as different parts of the same overall process. The great American judge, Oliver Wendell Holmes, really nailed this modern view. He said, a word isn't like a crystal, perfect and unchanging. He said it's more like the skin of a living thought. Its color and meaning can change depending on the circumstances. You can't just isolate a word from its context and expect to understand it. And that idea has led to a really big shift in thinking. So now, instead of picking one rule, am I going to be literal today, or am I going to look for mischief, judges tend to weave all of them together. They've realized that to find the real meaning, you have to look at the words, the context they're in, and the law's purpose, all at the same time. Another judge, Lord Reed, put it perfectly. He said these so-called rules are our servants, not our masters. They're not rigid commands you have to obey. They're more like aids or pointers. They can guide a judge's thinking, but they're no substitute for good old-fashioned judgment. This new blended method is often called the unitary approach. So you still start with the literal, ordinary meaning of the words. But, and this is the key, you figure out that ordinary meaning by looking at it in its complete context, thinking about the law's purpose right from the start. It's a much more holistic way to read the law. Okay, so we've gone through all these different rules and competing philosophies, which might sound a little academic, but it all brings us to the most critical question of all. Why does any of this actually matter out here in the real world? Well, it matters a ton, because how a judge chooses to interpret a law has massive consequences. It can literally change someone's life, decide the future of a company, or draw the line on how much power the government has. This is not just some word game for lawyers. This stuff shapes the very fabric of the society we all live in. And that really leaves us with this one big final question to chew on. When a law isn't clear, what is a judge's true role? Are they just a legal mechanic, carefully following the instruction manual written by the lawmakers? Or are they something more, like a co-author, helping to perfect the law and make sure it's not only sensible, but also just? The answer we choose to that question really defines our entire legal system.